Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement. On Ukraine, as NATO has said, we need both sides to show restraint and de-escalate with international law adhered to, including Russia allowing unhindered access to Ukraine's ports on the Sea of Azov. Mr. Speaker, we face an unprecedented situation. The Prime Minister has led us into a national crisis. And if any more evidence was needed of why we face this grave situation, the Prime Minister demonstrated it last week's summit. There were some warm words drafted, and the Prime Minister even managed to negotiate those away to be replaced by words about preparing for no deal. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister boasted, "I had a robust discussion with President Juncker," but that cannot hide the cold reality that she achieved nothing. Standing at the dispatch box last week, the Prime Minister said, "I have made some progress." Mr. Speaker, she has not made any progress at all. The Prime Minister said so herself while still in Brussels, and I quote, "The EU is clear, as am I, that this is the deal." The European Commission has been categorical. It will not be renegotiated. The EU Council has given the clarification that were possible at this stage, so no further meetings with the UK are foreseen. The deal is unchanged and not going to change. The House must get on with the vote and move on to consider the realistic alternatives. There can be no logical reason for this delay, except that in taking shambolic government to a new level, the Prime Minister no longer has the backing of her cabinet. The International Trade Secretary suggested that the Prime Minister's deal no longer has the backing of the cabinet. It's worth quoting his words. And I quote, "I think that it is very difficult to support the deal if we don't get changes to the backstop. I don't think it will get through. I'm not even sure if the Cabinet will agree for it to be put to the House of Commons."
Yeah, well, we've seen that.
So we had the spectacle of the last few days with numerous Cabinet members coming forward with their own alternatives. The International Trade Secretary suggested that a 2-year transition to no deal is an option. The Work and Pensions Secretary says the government needs to try something different and build a consensus in Parliament. The Attorney General is reported as saying he wants her gone and for the deal to be renegotiated, while the International Development Secretary is allegedly liaising with the ERG to launch an alternative option. Others are reportedly working on a second referendum. But even if Cabinet no longer backs the deal, then who knows what the options would be? So can the Prime Minister answer this? 1, does her deal still have the confidence of the Cabinet? 2, is Cabinet collective responsibility still in operation? 3, does it remain government policy to avoid a no-deal outcome? Mr. Speaker, an unacceptable deal is on the table. No amendment has been secured, renegotiations have been rebuffed, and not even mere assurances have been offered. And the Prime Minister's shoddy deal no longer even has the backing of the Cabinet. The Prime Minister ran away from putting her deal before Parliament because even her own Cabinet has doubts, and she herself admits Parliament won't back it. So we're left edging ever closer to the 29th of March deadline without a deal and without even an agreed plan in Cabinet to get a deal. The Prime Minister has cynically run down the clock, trying to manoeuvre Parliament into a choice between 2 unacceptable outcomes, her deal or no deal. The country, workers and businesses are increasingly anxious. Even yesterday, the CBI said uncertainty is throttling firms and threatening jobs, not in the future, but right now. The British Chamber of Commerce has said there is no time to waste. A responsible Prime Minister would, for the good of this country, have put this deal before the House this week. This week, so we could move on from this government's disastrous negotiations. This, Mr. Speaker, is a constitutional crisis, and the Prime Minister is the architect of it. She's leading the most shambolic and chaotic government in modern British history. Even Cabinet no longer functions. A Prime Minister whose authority has been lost. A cabinet disintegrating into cliques and factions, and a Conservative Party so fundamentally split that its very existence is being discussed. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has failed to renegotiate her deal, failed to get any meaningful reassurances. There is no excuse for any more dither or delay. This government, Mr. Speaker, has already become the first government in British history to be held in contempt by Parliament. The debate on the meaningful vote was pulled at the last minute, and the Prime Minister has now wasted 5 weeks having achieved nothing. Not a single word renegotiated, not a single reassurance gained. This last week has embodied the failure, chaos and indecision at the heart of this government's shambolic handling of Brexit. Today, they've been dragged kicking and screaming to announce a date to restart the debate. But, Mr. Speaker, it is...
Mr. Ellis, you're a distinguished ornament of a government department, a representative of the executive branch. Be good, man. You can do so much better when you try. Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
But, Mr. Speaker, it is disgraceful that a month has been wasted since we were due to vote on the 11th of December. There can be no further attempts to dodge the accountability of government to this Parliament, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman asked me 3 questions during that response. Does the deal still have the confidence of the Cabinet? Yes. Does Cabinet collective responsibility still apply? Yes. Does the Cabinet want to avoid no deal? Yes, the Cabinet wants to ensure that we leave the European Union with a good deal, and that is this deal. The real indecision is the indecision at the heart of a Labour Party that has no plan and no alternative. And the national crisis is an opposition that is irresponsible, that puts its party interests first before the interests of the British people.
Mr. Andrew Mitchell.
It is clear, Mr. Speaker, is it not, that the deal which my right honourable friend has so assiduously negotiated is most unlikely to secure the support of this House of Commons. In these circumstances, does she not think it would be wiser to seek an extension to Article 50?
I'm not having the right honourable gentleman shout it down. I very gently say to a government whip, don't stand near the chair and shout at your colleagues. If you're going to do that, leave the chamber. We'll manage perfectly adequately without you. Mr. Andrew Mitchell.
To seek an extension to Article 50 rather than to leave with no deal.
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I don't think it's right to be seeking that extension of Article 50. I think what Parliament will be faced with is a decision to exercise its responsibility to deliver on the referendum vote, to deliver Brexit. I continue to believe that this is a good deal. Yes, we are seeking those further reassurances, but I continue to believe that we can leave with a good deal and that this is it.